Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Tonight we're joined by Sonia Soda and Alex Dean. Lovely to see you both. And let's dive straight on in with the story in the Times. An embarrassing one for David Cameron. He leaves office. He usually gets to make a few nominations to the upper house. Appears that they've been blocked at the first hurdle.
Yes, that's right. So it sounds like what happened is that Cameron put forward some of his former staffers for peerages and other honours, and an official at the Cabinet Office, which is where they first go to, has raised ethical concerns. I think it looks really embarrassing for Cameron. It's sort of the House of Lords at its worst. You know, as someone who's worked in and around politics, when the House of Lords works really well, it's when, you know, experts with sort of 20 or 30 years experience in business or science really scrutinise government policy in a way that sometimes not even the opposition can. And what this really feels like, it's a bit like, you know, peerages for your mates. And while you can understand why, you know, these are long-serving staff members, he wants to recognise the contribution that they've made, I don't think that should be through, you know, putting them in the House of Lords, giving them a say over legislation. That doesn't feel very democratic to me.
Well, the House of Lords isn't democratic at all.
No.
So I take a similar view to yours about the House of Lords. I think that it works very well when people are used in the kind of role that you've rightly described. It still doesn't have a democratic mandate to start with. Let's not forget there are still some hereditaries in the House of Lords, let alone our life peers. I think that the people who are being discussed on the front of this newspaper, who of course don't deserve to have their names dragged through the mud. They're people who were long-standing workers at the heart of government.
Some of them been with David Cameron since you
even since I was there. I mean,
I think there's a peerage in it for you.
I doubt it very much. But I mean, so Gabby Burton's been with the Prime Minister for more than 10 years. These are people who deserve thanks and recognition for their public service, and I am sure have an important contribution to continue to make to our public life. But I do question the way, more broadly than this example, I question the way that our House of Lords is getting used per se. We were reflecting before, this is now just out of control. In terms of sheer size, it's the second largest assembly of people in the legislative body in the world after the Chinese, and it's soon, if it carries on this rate, going to be the largest in the world. It's just it's just ridiculous.
But we come back to the same point that we always do in this debate, is that there really isn't an appetite on the part of the public for another set of elections and making the House of Lords, you know, fully accountable.
I don't know. Well, we get over that, I think.
I mean, I think there's probably something in that, and I think there's something in this idea that actually, if you have an elected House of Lords, well, doesn't that mean that you would lose some of the expertise? But I think there's a difference between saying, you know, we should move to a fully elected House of Lords and saying we really need to reform the nominations process so it's cleaner and have some element of election in there.
And slim it down massively.
Yes, absolutely.
Good luck with that. Let's turn to the front page of the Telegraph. Staycation, a boost to the economy. Well, it seems fairly straightforward point, isn't it? If we're all staying at home, then the UK is going to do better as a result.
Sterling has taken a dip. Of course, markets react in response to events, and I think that the United Kingdom has many great places to go on holiday, and this is an opportunity to rediscover parts of our own island. And I've always thought it was islands, and I've always thought it's quite strange that people often fly hundreds of miles, sometimes thousands of miles, when there are great resorts and beaches and places to spend your time right here at home. So I think this boost, as the Telegraph rightly says, could not come at a better time and will have a disproportionately positive effect on our economy.
Yeah, but there are two ways of looking at this story, aren't there? And the other way of looking at it is we're all poorer as a result of Brexit. That's why we're staying at home.
I think there's definitely that. There's also the fact that...
How do you get that?
If the pound is weaker, people aren't wanting to...
Exactly.
Oh, well, you mean in comparative terms if we travel?
Yeah.
You're not suggesting we are all poorer in and of itself?
I do like to praise these
It's too early
things.
to call that, but there's lots of economists saying that they think that's going to be the case.
Name one.
Name 90% of economists, Alex, think that Brexit is going to have a negative impact in the long term on the British economy.
You said people think we are poorer because of Brexit, and you said most economists do, and I said name one, and you can't.
Let's not get hung up on the details. But I think the other thing about this story is, which this article points out, is that one of the reasons it's not just the weaker pound, it's terrorism and terrorism on the continent.
Right.
And it's, you know, places like Egypt, Turkey, Brussels and Paris, so where we've seen some of the worst terrorist attacks are really suffering. And I think, you know, it's great there's a beast at home, but it's really sad for countries like Egypt and Turkey, really poor countries that massively rely on the tourism industry. So I think there is another side to this story, and you know, you can completely understand why people don't want to go to countries like that when there have been terrorist attacks. But it's terrorism working. It's the way that you know, ISIS works.
Yeah.
They want to get into our heads. They want to make us scared of going on holiday to some of these places.
We shouldn't let them change our way of life, should we? People wanting to stay at home for positive reasons, great. People staying because they're concerned about a weaker pound, understandable. People being too frightened to go on the holidays they want to go on, that's terrible. And it's and we've really got to find ways to reassure people that the ability to go to a resort or go to even Paris, bookings by British people in Paris, this story says, are declining, and Brussels too. I mean, we've got to get hold of this kind of thing and restore our free freedom of travel and our ability to spend time in places with a sense of security.
I can heartily recommend the west coast of Scotland at this time of year as well, of course.
Can you?
Yeah, indeed. Wonder why. At The Guardian, the front page, this is a really tricky time for Theresa May. She's just taken the keys to number 10. And already, François Hollande has laid his cards on the table. You will not have a deal. You will not have access to the single market unless you have, you know, essentially an open borders policy.
I don't know why we spend so much time talking about what the EU will demand of us, rather than thinking about what the United Kingdom, with a balance of trade decisively in our favour, may demand of them.
Well, I think it's a very clear message that Hollande has sent out. You're not going to have single market access without accepting freedom of movement. And I think that's, you know, he's made it very clear there will be a price to pay if we want border controls.
What do you think that means?
Well, I think it means that, you know, so we've already seen the French talking about, you know, we'll probably get, you know, tariff-free imports of cars, but I'm not so sure about financial services. France have got their eye on the City of London.
There's no free markets in services right now. What you're describing is the status quo.
No, that's not true. If you look at the way that the City of London operates, our financial services sector have passports to operate right across the world, and that is definitely something that's at risk. I think if you can understand, if you look at the domestic French political situation, though, you can sort of see why Hollande's being quite hard-line. He faces a situation at home where the Front National is doing quite well. Marine Le Pen, its leader, Eurosceptic party, starting to talk about Frexit in the wake of Brexit. So, you know, this is why it's going to be so difficult to negotiate a good deal with 27 other countries, because all these leaders have got their own, you know, domestic political considerations to think about.
I understood why it made sense for those who wished, as you did, for perfectly good reasons, wanted us to remain in the European Union. I understood why it made sense to kind of talk up those challenges before we had the vote. Now that we've decided the direction of travel for our country, it just seems to me to be weird that kind of bogeymen are being created and you give more weight to the voice of Hollande than to our own Prime Minister. There are 4 fundamental freedoms the EU wants to talk about, as listed helpfully on the front of the Guardian. Freedom of movement for goods, you already agree isn't going to change. Capital, well, freedom of movement and capital.
I haven't agreed that freedom of movement. I said there will be some things in which you might not see tariffs. And it's not talking. Alex, this is being realistic. We face an incredibly complex, tough set of negotiations.
Yes, you seem to derive huge enjoyment from the pessimism with which you express prospects.
I think that's fairly harsh.
Well, no, you do too.
Well, no, I just enjoy the sport, you know, while sitting on the sofas. I do want to bring in just very, very briefly the story on the right-hand side of the right-hand column of the Guardian there. Mike Ashley, Sports Direct. Again, it appears that the Parliamentary Committee has come down pretty strongly, accusing him of operating a Victorian workhouse.
Not just him.
Quite right too, and it was sort of Guardian reporting that really sort of highlighted some of these practices at Sports Direct and led to the Select Committee investigation. And what it turns out, Mike Ashley, I mean, for weeks he refused to go and give evidence to this committee, and now he's gone and done it and said, you know, I just didn't know anything about it, and it's ludicrous to say that. As this article points out, he makes weekly visits to his warehouses and his factories. There's no way that these sorts of working practices could not have been sanctioned by him, I think, realistically.
And I may have misread it, but I think that quote about Victorian practices was not actually from a member of the committee. It's from one of his top 20 shareholders. And that's when you know, when people like that are briefing the newspapers, that's when you need help, because he's running a business which employs many people, and played right, they should be able to turn this around. But the classic challenge, which is not going down well here at all, is either you knew that workers were being paid under minimum wage in your factory and you were fine with it, or you were negligent in knowing what was going on in your factories. And he just doesn't seem to be able to get out of that bind.
Alex, Sonia, I think we'll leave it there.